So today I'm going to show you how I made this quilt. This is the same size as the other ones that I'm making so far. This is the third one, and it is approximately 31 by 23 inches. Okay, so I have my first two panels, and now I'm going to cut out the motif for my second panel. I really like this Alexander Henry fabric. I'm not sure if I've seen it before, but once I saw that it was available on the Joann website, I had to get it. And I'll put a link below to this fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out this sailor on the left, and I'm just roughly cutting around the image. And put my fabric on the side. Okay, so so here I have to get the heat and bond. I didn't have it handy, so I get the heat and bond light and place it on there, and I cut it out. I bought about 15 yards of this when it was on sale at Joann. Didn't think I was going to use it, and here I am. I'm using it quite a bit. So I have to get the ironing board, plug in the iron, and I'm going to press the heat and bond onto the Alexander Henry fabric. I want to make sure that there's no bits of adhesive showing through on the other side, because that's going to stick to the iron. And what I wound up doing was I cut the adhesive just a little too short. So I'm adding another piece just to cover the tip of the flagpole. So I'm just removing the adhesive, making sure that it made contact with the fabric where it should, and now I'm going to fussy cut it. Now when you're fussy cutting, I don't recommend using big scissors like I am. I've been doing this for a while, so I pretty much have it under control, but honestly I'd rather use smaller scissors, and my smaller scissors are, I'll use like embroidery snips, that size. That's how small they are, like 6-inch scissors, because it's easier to control the tight spaces. But you know, like I said, I've been doing this for a while, so I have it under control. And these scissors, as much as they're about 40 years old, but I get them sharpened periodically, and although they're dull right now, the blade closest to the handle and the tips seem to be pretty sharp. So there it is. I'm just checking it, making sure that I've got all the pieces, and I notice that I don't. All the white pieces are light pieces out, and I'm just snipping away here. Okay, always make sure that you have enough adhesive all the way around, because if not, it will not stick, it will not look good. Here I am rehearsing that blue, purple, and pink fabric, although as much as I really like it, I wind up not using it. These two motifs on either side, the ladies, they are it looks too muddy, so what I wind up doing is I get the green, and that is what I use for this sailor. His lava lamp is in green instead of the blue, purple, and green that I have here. You always want to make sure that you addition, like in this case I have 3 pieces, so you want to make sure that the pieces that are going next to each other, that they work well together, because if I were to put these together on the quilt, the finished product, it would be too dark. By using this green in the center, it's cohesive, it works well together, and it's a good contrast between the 2 lamps on either side. So now what I'm doing is I'm using the Gutermann clear invisible thread, and I'm going to top stitch around the motif, and I'm using a zigzag to top stitch around it. Now there's a couple of reasons you want to top stitch around it. One of them is you don't want those corners to come up, and the other thing is it really secures this piece. Although the Heat and Bond Light is great stuff, but I just feel like it gives it a more polished look. And you know that this is going to last a good long time. Now here you can do this a couple of different ways. You can just zigzag on top. What I like to do is I like to go around each and every nook and cranny as tightly as I can. And I just feel that this is what works best for me. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you have another way of doing it, but this is what I feel works best for me. And those are the small snips that I would use for cutting out, fussy cutting. And there it is, there's that one. Now what I need to do here is I need to go over the lava lamp, and that's what I'm going to top stitch next once I thread the needle that the thread came out of. Now I like to snip my threads as I go. I like to snip my threads just because I feel that it's less work at the end, and it's something that if you're thinking about it, do it right then and there. So here I'm going to top stitch in a zigzag with the clear Gutermann thread all the way around the lava lamp. And then when I get done going all the way around the lava lamp, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cover the top, the center, and the bottom of the lava lamp bottle. So here I'm going to snip the threads, and I'm going to go back in and do that top. There it goes. Sorry about the light changes, but kept forgetting to adjust it. And when I'm putting the light this way, it's harder for me to see at the machine, but it looks better on camera, so that's what I'm going with here. When I threaded the machine, I forgot to put the light back. So there's that one. Okay, now I'm sewing the panels together with the flames. And I'm trying to cover each panel first. And I know it looks like it falls short, but I cut the black panels a little bit longer than I needed. Because I always like to cut my panels longer, and then I go back in when I go to straighten out the quilt. I just go back in and I straighten it out. Okay, here's some more flames. I pre-cut my flames, and I'm sewing them on. Now for this, I'm just using a straight stitch, and I'm using black thread. Now this quilt did require me changing thread out a couple of times. I used to be bothered by that, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I mean, there have been alterations that I've done where I've had to have 2 and 3 threads switch. I have different machines, and I can use, each machine, set it up with a different color. But sometimes I find that it's just faster to switch out the colors on the sewing machine. And the thing I like about this machine, this is an industrial machine that I'm using. It's a Singer 20U. And it goes really fast. It's a workhorse. I don't have problems with it. And it handles just about any fabric. Now I'm top stitching. I'm trying to stitch in the ditch. And I have the flannel backing, which is my batting for the quilt. You don't need a heavy batting, because this is just a wall quilt. It's just going to be hung up, and it's not really for warmth or anything. but I like to have something in there. Then I'm top stitching the quilt itself, the top, to the flannel. And then when I put the backing on, I don't top stitch anything, and I could hand tie it, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. In this case I did it because it was just a small wall quilt. I think I mentioned earlier it was like 31 by 23 inches. So I don't really feel the need to hand tie it, but you can if that's what you want to do. And here I have safety pins on top of the quilt top to hold the flannel backing and the quilt top together in place while I'm sewing. I want to make sure, because I've cut the flannel slightly bigger than the quilt top, but I want to make sure that I don't fall short. So if I do this while I'm pinning, then I know it's okay, and then when I'm sewing it doesn't shift on me. You can use safety pins, and I recommend using safety pins, because I did get scratched up quite a bit with these straight pins, but that's what I'm used to. I'm used to using straight pins. You know, you'll get snagged on your clothes, you'll get snagged on your skin, but sometimes I just rather use straight pins. So now I'm folding up the quilt so that it fits under the head of the sewing machine. My thread broke there, so I was just finishing off that last stitch in the ditch row. And I'm snipping my thread. Okay, and I'm removing the pins as I go along, because once I have that stitch in place, I no longer need the straight pins. Again, stitch in the ditch, and when I'm stitching in the ditch, I'm trying to go more towards the black side than the flame side. I'm hoping that if I fall off the ditch, it goes to the back and it doesn't show on the orange and yellow. Back in, folding the fabric. And as you can see, I used a black for the bobbin. It doesn't really matter what color you use, because no one's going to see that. There are instances where you might need to use a matching color. Like, for example, if I used a white on the bottom to go better with the flannel, it wouldn't have worked out so well, because it may show on the top, depending on how your tension is on your sewing machine. It might show on the top, the white. So I just went with black, and I figured, you know, if it comes through, no one's going to be able to tell the difference. Okay, and I'm at the last row of the quilt. Again, here I'm just top stitching. Now when you're top stitching, you don't want to pull on your fabric, you just want to guide it under these foot, and I'm done. Now last thing that I'm going to do before I put on the binding is I'm going to go ahead and stitch on the top all the way around, and all that is securing it in place, making sure that when I sew on that bias binding, I catch the flannel and the quilt top. That's the only reason I'm doing this. I want to make sure that I get them both, and I don't have to worry about it, because I don't pin my binding. When I put my bias binding on, I just sew. Again, I've done so many, I've sewn so many bias bindings, and here I handmade my own bias binding because I didn't have any pre-made. And I also wanted to make sure that the black binding matched the black of the fabric, because this is a Kona cotton, and if you know anything about Kona, it's a really nice deep black, and when you buy other blacks, no matter what brand it is, they're not always going to match. So I wanted to make sure that mine matched well. And if you buy separate bias binding that's already pre-made, it's not going to match. So here I am steaming it. I'm using the tape guide, that silver aluminum piece. It's silver, aluminum, and plastic. I've come to the end, I'm using steam, and I'm using the highest setting, which is a cotton setting. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to go ahead and sew on my bias binding, and I don't pin it, I just sew. I've shown this in other videos of me sewing on a binding, but what I do is when I get to the end, I stitch all the way to the end, then I back stitch, I pick up the bias tape, I tuck it under, make sure it's all fitted well, and then I sew. I don't pin it because I find that when I come to the end of the corner of the, let's say like right now I'm about to turn a corner coming up. So if I pin it, some of that pressure from the presser foot gets under the binding and it pushes it. So I have to readjust anyway. So I find that if I don't pin it, I don't have to do that because I'll just adjust it when I'm turning the corner like right now. So there I am. And although I'm not checking on this one if I caught the bottom, I've sewn a couple of these so I know I'm catching the bottom. And on the other thing is that I have stitched all the way around. But by the bottom I mean the bottom of the bias binding, the bottom layer of the bias binding. So some of these corners can get kind of fussy. And I use my pink snips to adjust it and help. I use it as a stiletto sometimes because I find that it helps me to guide the fabric. Also sometimes when I sewing machine like there, it got stuck because there's like a hump between the two where I added the two pieces together of the bias binding. So sometimes I need the scissors to guide it through without ripping it. You have to do it very carefully, but it can be done. So here I am, I'm going to turn the last corner. My pins are still, some of my pins are still on the quilt. I'm going to turn my last corner and then I'm going to sew to the middle, and then I'm going to cut my bias binding on a 45-degree angle again. But you want to look at the binding that's already on there, which direction to cut, because if you cut in the wrong direction, you're going to find yourself short. So what I do is I leave the binding slightly longer, between a ½ inch and an inch is good, and then you know that it's met, that it's going to meet the other side, and as long as you have it going in the right direction, you're good. So there I am sizing it up, cut it, and I'm sewing it. And that is a wrap. That's done. Okay, and there's the backing. I use a tattooed inspired backing too. That's like an old world tattoo fabric. And that's also from Joanne. So I'm taking off the pins, and there is my quilt finished. Okay, and there's the backing. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please thumbs up, subscribe, share, and like. Thanks for watching. Bye.